The question is, can you tell us more about Norman Cousins? Norman Cousins was the editor of Saturday Review, and he had a very deep concern about this issue, and he pulled together these peace meetings. Okay, so he was a journalist, and he connected with the church and with Kennedy and with Khrushchev, and he became the Pope's unofficial emissary through his concern for peace. That's how he got involved.
No relative to Bishop Cousins?
No. It's a different cousin, if you will. Good question.
But excellent procedure.
Okay. Any questions? I need questions to help me here.
Are you going to get into the death of Kennedy, Gandhi?
Well, we talked about the death of Gandhi in the Gandhi lecture. The death of Kennedy doesn't exactly fit into the 7 witnesses for peace, but we will look at what Merton said about that when we get to Merton. Okay, so I will mention it in reference to Merton, but I'd have to give a whole nother series on the question of the journey of President Kennedy. What we're talking about here is learning about the witnesses for peace. We want to collect those witnesses to help us with our blind spot. Okay, that's our goal for this series.
You did a fantastic job on that.
Okay.
Because nowhere would I have ever read anything like that.
Right, and there's 2 books that you can look at that I used extensively for this. JFK and the Unspeakable by James Douglas, and an old book he wrote, 1968. He wrote it before, but he added to it until 1968. James Douglas, The Nonviolent Cross. And that's where I got some of the guidance on reading Pachamenteros from. Okay? But yeah, I got it. I borrowed from Douglas here. I actually called Jim Douglas after I read his book because I was so impressed. He lives down in Birmingham, and he's friends with some friends of mine from Notre Dame. So I talked with him about common friends and what he had written and all that. I don't generally do that, but there are a few authors I have such respect for that I like to converse with them beyond their books. Right, Ron? Right. Okay. Any questions?
Do you feel like there's a need in this world today that our presidents and people should be reading this piece? All the, it seems like, the encyclical.
Well, yeah.
We need to bring it back.
Right. No, we do. That's one of the reasons I chose to do this series, because I have an interior drive in my own heart to bring this back somehow. But the only way to bring it back is to ponder it, is to contemplate it. I think contemplation being the key step. But contemplation has a lot of levels to it. I actually appreciate my friend Peter, who identifies one of the movements of contemplation with Jesus in the temple at 12 years old, asking the teachers of the law the meaning of the law for 3 days, right? And then his parents come and get him. But he's definitely, that's a form of contemplation. So our questions and answers here are a way to spark further hope for peace. That's why I like that questions and answers better than my own lectures. Questions, please.
So, regarding a thing on peace, a church document, wouldn't you say that Populorum Professio was the peace document that, if you're looking at church teaching, sort of followed after Pachamenteros?
Yes.
And then there were other teachings too, particularly ones of John Paul II, of Laborem Exercens, Solicitudo Rei, Socialis, and Centesimus Annus, right? Those would be like social encyclicals that Pacem in Terris kind of sparked. But the church developed, okay, here's how you got to become peace. And that what was the statement that he made? Development is a new name for peace?
Development is a new name for peace. That's Pope Paul VI. And I gave a lecture, actually, my only academic lecture in my whole life was on Populorum Progressio, and it was at Walsh University. Okay? And the reason I gave it at Walsh University is that I wrote up the proposal for the lecture, and the people at Notre Dame didn't accept it. And I was desperate to give the lecture, so I called up someone who had done work in Africa. And I said, Larry, would you let me give this lecture at your place? And he said, sure. So I gave the lecture at Walsh University instead of Notre Dame. But it's the only lecture I've given in my life in a university. So, but it was on Populorum Progressio, Joe. And you are absolutely right. That's the next step, is Pope Paul VI. Peace, development is another name for peace. That's correct. And then I'm giving the next lecture on Wednesday on John Paul II, so we'll get to that. Did you have a question? I'm waiting for a question.
Me?
Yeah, if you got one.
Actually, it's not so much a question as a
comment or a concern.
About the encyclical, and the second component that you emphasize, truth.
Right.
And it's sometimes hard to keep faith in truth in the system that we live in, the political system, the whole thing with fake news.
Yeah.
With people not being willing, I think, to even open themselves to really considering truth. And I think that seems to me to be a major concern.
It is a major concern.
Peace, and for all sorts of other reasons.
Right, and for all sorts of other reasons. And so, at least for me, personally, my journey has taken me to listen to sources that I would have never listened to 10 years ago. Personally, I'm talking about using the internet in more creative ways to discover other voices that help me understand the issue from a perspective that I would have never appreciated before. And the other point I would make, the person that really helped me with this, well, there were three, okay? And they're all priests. One's a bishop, okay? Father Binta, God rest his soul, he helped me that way. Father Okumo, who runs the Bosco Project in northern Uganda, he helped me that way. And primarily, or the most important one, is Archbishop Odama. And it's not like these guys took me and said, now, you're going to change your view. No. But they did is they gave me insight to look at things from a different perspective, and that gave me a new lens to look at the questions of the way our media has betrayed us. One thing I will tell you, people, please, it's a moral teaching of the church, and that's why I want to emphasize it. Listen to what he says about the media here. And pray over this. Contemplate this, please. This is really, really scary. Truth further demands that the various media of social communications made available by modern progress, which enable the nations to know each other better, be used with serene objectivity. Listen to that. Where is the serene objectivity? That's what Ron's question gets at. And good old Pope John the 23rd was onto it, man. Listen to what he says. That need not, of course, rule out any legitimate emphasis on the positive aspects of people's ways of life. But listen to this, methods of information which fall short of the truth, and by the same token impair the reputation of this people or that, must be discarded. So throw off the shackles of your mind, hear the serene teaching of peace that comes through the church, and I don't mean the church, not through the cracks of the church, but through the people like Odama in the church who are willing to step out and say, kill me if you must, but if you do, you'll be killing your father. That's what Odama said when he initiated negotiations with the rebels. They were so-called rebels. He called them his children. Notice, going back to fatherhood as the basis of this way to read Pachamentaris. I'm sorry, I'm preaching. I'm an old catechist, I'm going to preach. Yes, stop me.
Do you think that in our world today,
Thank you. Thank you, Ron.
Sorry,
Thanks for coming. All the best.
do you think that despite all the talk of globalization, there's a great lack of seeing the world as one family?
Yes. There's a lot of talk about globalization, but seeing the world as one family is a relational or contemplative truth. And so it's like globalization can just be an economic buzzword. But if we see the world as one family in a contemplative, disciplined way, then we're going to get somewhere.
The latest issue of our Sunday Visitor.
Yeah.
Does anybody get it? I happen to get it, but it has a whole article on the media,
Okay.
the truth and the untruth of it.
Okay. So the church is a source of a way to assess the media. Okay? Especially the church that operates like Pope John the 23rd operated. Okay? That's how I would say it. Okay? And Karen's point, well taken. We can't allow economic buzzwords to overtake relational truths. That's all.
If I could get you to repeat the one line you gave. You said globalization can be used as a buzzword for, and you said economic structure? Or
Yeah, economic operations. Yeah, something like that, right?
business, international business.
Right. You can use it, but it doesn't get to the core that he was getting to when that we talk about the world as one family. Because so much of globalization is depending on an economic model that's materialistic, be it neoliberal or be it socialist or communist. Both those models are so inadequate to the spiritual needs of people that we have to supply, and that's the job of the church, to supply the wisdom to balance these things off so they don't end up destroying us, sucking the life out of us, right? And we do other things. We support culture and art and things like that make this thing move forward. Philosophy. Lunch and learn sessions. Whatever. Okay, any other? This is good. I know it's about as clear as mud, but I want to keep working on this. Any other problems or?
Well, I know going back to your John conversation and how it wasn't to win a debate, it wasn't to get points, that you somehow had a victory in a conversation with someone. And yes, stacking bits of insight on top of insight, having time to be contemplative. Those are the things that you're recommending as far as a first stage.
Yeah.
But I think that I'm speaking for all of us that we thirst for, particularly in the questions that we were hearing from Ron, we thirst for the chance, the option for us to somehow be more intrinsically involved with the change and in bringing peace. to the world. And so if we have like at least a first grade understanding of what John Donne wanted, what Gandhi wanted, and what the 23rd wanted for us, how can we, with that even elementary understanding, how can we reach others? Less practically, I think,
Wow.
think of means for us to be able to do that.
Wow, that's a great question. I would open that question up to everybody here, because I don't feel able to answer it very well, except to say everybody has to discern how they fit in what God is doing with their own life to follow His presence into what they're called to do with the information. That's how I might put it. In other words, I can only talk about what I've been called to do, right? But I don't know that I can't place that as a template on anybody else. Yeah, does that make sense? Does that answer make sense? I'm not, yeah.
I want to read the Passing Over book that I can't recall the name of it now, where Don passed over to try to understand Islam and Buddhism and so on. And I want to read that, trying to get it ordered through the library. But I mean, I think doing that is great. And because we got whatever it is, a billion or 1.2 billion members of the Islam religion in the world, and it seems to be the strategy of choice right now for some people, 35, whatever, 45% of our country, that, I guess we're going to have to kill them, That's the way we're going to be able to win this. And in order to get in the way, stand in that breach and stop that mentality, that's what I would like to be part of.
Okay, so the specific, the specific situation where people are thinking that violence is the answer for the problems. I'm repeating it for the microphone, and you want to try to remedy that somehow with the wisdom of dialogue, with the wisdom of passing over, and we want to find a way through this, a nonviolent way, a way without war. And that's exactly right. That's exactly what I'm looking for, too. I mean,
Barron's latest book,
Yeah.
Bishop Barron from Los Angeles, wrote that it is each individual, if we're going to change anything, it is each individual that has to change. It's not just these priests that have fallen, but it's all of us. And that was one of his latest comments.
Okay. So
And
I'd
yeah.
like to follow up with that insight by bringing in the book of James, that concurs with that, where it's those members within us warring that we each have to focus on and learn how to create peace inside ourselves. Absolutely.
And I have a sister friend who just sent me the latest retreat she gave. And in there, it is, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And all the individual sayings that Christ gave us, that we should be following, which are the means whereby we can change not only ourselves but others that we help.
Yeah, Peter.
I'm interested in knowing, because war is a result of people no longer able to talk on a particular issue.
Right.
Okay, so let's say the Muslim issue. There's local people who take the opposite position of kind of suggesting. So we can kind of see where we're at, because we take the best local people where they take a different position, and then we come together and we make an attempt. Is there any way of talking with each other on this issue. And then we can see if we're not able to, then there's war. And then we find how many issues that are important issues where local people cannot talk. I mean, they're gonna end up hating each other. And the likelihood, there's 3 or 4 very important issues that we can only hate each other. And then we know this is the reality of the human condition. You know, we can talk that it would be nice that we could talk this through, but that's a nice idea. But the reality is we probably can't.
Without contemplation, we can't.
Well, it may be that we can't, because people have dug in. They have simply dug in, and you take the American Revolution. Could they have talked it through? Probably not. They had already dug in. I mean, Gus knows that. The whole Thomas Paine thing. American Revolution. I mean, the American Civil War. Probably had dug in. War was only what was going to happen. I'm just proposing
Right.
that people do dig in, and
Cold
they.
War could have turned into the next World War.
But it didn't. But it didn't, because there were a few people who could hear the voice that could get them to the negotiating table rather than to the war.
No, but just looking at the American people, I mean, there was people begging not to have the American Revolution,
Okay,
and they didn't. And there was people begging not to have the American Civil War. Begging, but people refused to go that route.
right. Yeah, I mean,
So I'm just saying, on the Muslim issue, they are, I mean, we need to find out where are we actually at.
locally.
Yeah.
That's what you mean.
Everybody only lives locally. Where else do you live?
Yeah,
There's no other place you live.
Right, and then we can encourage contemplation as part of the process too.
But it's good to find out where you're at.
Well, where your common ground is and build from that.
Yeah. Because people feel that, for example, the Muslims are such a threat to us that it's beyond belief. And that if they come in and take over, we're done. We're done. They really feel that way. And they feel real strong.
Joe,
People that I'm talking about. Some of
They
those
feel
that I
so strong
encountered-
about it that there's no doubt in their mind the greatest threat is the Muslim threat. They don't even.
I can say this, that some of those people that I've encountered, that because of commonality, because of an appreciation for love, because of understanding brotherhood, and that we are a part of the family, not being nearly as eloquent in the way that it was voiced by Gus today, but by seeing it as a family. How could you possibly kill one of your brothers or your son? The way Martin Luther King, lived and said that, the greatest gift, the greatest discovery was not fire, it wasn't the wheel, it was love. And it was something introduced by Jesus Christ. And love and the understanding and the power is so much greater than any of those other inventions. And precisely because if you loved everyone, how could you allow them to go hungry? If you see your brother there and you have love in your heart for that person. So those types of things, I believe, are universal. They are, if we seek and we pursue them properly and contemplate them. Those are truths that can be a foundation of bedrock, and that building on that, there is a chance. It might be generational. It might be, the person you're arguing with, it might be their son that hears the conversation, that later can put it into, a Khrushchev Kennedy moment with Norman, whatever his name is.
Cousins, yeah.
Well, on a lesson,
All of which probably thought that they had failed. I bet all of them did.
Right, well, no, John the 23rd thought he had failed on one level. Norman Cousins felt like he failed. Do you hear that in the story? But they didn't. They were actually feeling failure while they were having success. I mean, how do you account for that?
the example I'm always given by people who take the other side is that if you're the husband and you love your wife and you love your children, and somebody comes in to break into your house, then love would demand that you kill the
I
assailant.
think maybe Gandhi would say no.
I'm just saying, this is the example they give. And so how do you wrestle with that? Would love kill to save the wife?
I think it would,
Or would
he would
love
stand,
not kill
he
to
would
save
stand
the
there and
wife?
sacrifice his own life, perhaps. I mean, I don't know, I'm just guessing this through.
Well, this is the example they give. This is the
That's
example.
a very good one.
This is the model.
Yeah.
Love, what would love do? What the one argument is, love would kill to save the wife, and the other argument is, no, love would not kill. This is where it boils down to. How do you decide it?
And Scripture talks about, and I wish I could help, I'm sure you're all, several of you are going to be able to come to the passage for me, but the story of people that were martyrs and said, you have an opportunity here to say, to deny Christ or to go to your death. And now we're going to let your son die first. And now we're going to let your second son die. And they never gave away. Maccabees? Was Maccabees also taken out by Luther from the Bible? So that one was taken away, as was James.
No, James was proposed.
James by Luther, I thought was.
No, for a temporary time.
Yeah, but he didn't.
Well, there was a temporary moment where he thought it should be taken. I think he retracted for a while.
Well, you're way ahead of me on that. But I guess my point is that's an illustrated story.
Right. Right. These.
I like the story in the Bible of when Peter took up the sword and cut off the soldier's ear, and then Christ picked up the ear and put it back on the soldier and said, I'm the one that you're looking for. That seems to have some tie-in a sense, to the violence picture and what you do, what Christ would do in the face of
Right.
violence.
This is okay. Yeah, I don't.
Although Christ at the same time did sort of in a way exemplify some form of what you could maybe say violence when he, overturned the money tables in the temple.
Right.
And so there's an interesting. sort of
But yeah,
dichotomy there.
for John, let's just at least try to get to John the 23rd here. John the 23rd and Thomas Merton were not total pacifists. Neither one of them were. Okay, that's important to remember here. They recognized that there might be situations where conditions didn't allow for a totally pacifist response, but they wanted to raise the level of the discussion because the way people argued the other way was threatening the whole world. In other words, they turned the just war thing, they made it too important, so important that they couldn't see this point that the Pope had raised about trust being more important than the equality of arms, or trust being more important than force in human relationships. That's yeah. Karen, try
I
it.
was just thinking, it seems to me that in general, people aren't very much afraid of nuclear war the way we used to be. I was a little girl during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I remember having nightmares about that for several years afterwards. And my dad refused to do it, but people were talking about building bomb shelters in their backyards. And I'm sure there were people in our town who did. But now it seems like people just aren't aware of how, on a visceral level, they aren't aware of how devastating that would be to human life all over the world.
Okay, so yeah, there's this growth in understanding of how dangerous a war is because it could be escalated to that point. That was the argument that Merton was saying. And so too, John the 23rd and others. I mean, I just take them because they're part of the series. Yeah.
I'm sure most of us here have heard that saying, KNOW, no God, no peace, and NO, no God, no peace. And I think that really, is the key ultimately, is because talking about the truth is a principle, but ultimately and most importantly, it's a person. And that, Jesus, said, unless the Lord build the house, we labor in vain.
Right.
Apart from me, we can do nothing. And I think the key is certainly love and evangelization. that, not that people at one level, because we're all created in the image and likeness of God, and there's good ultimately, I think, in us because we are children of God and have shared that nature, but it's certainly a fallen nature, and sin does prevail in many instances. But I think that's why it's imperative that the church evangelize, and I think because of lots of things, certainly the abuse crisis is just one part of that dilemma in the way the church has been shortcoming in its teachings and just swimming against the tide of a society that's becoming more and more secular, and sin is becoming more and more accepted, and things that used to be kind of unspeakable are now obviously embraced. But I think that's really the key to peace, is really knowing God and knowing Jesus as the truth, and letting Him lead us and guide us and bring us in a closer relationship with Him, the Prince of Peace. And the people that don't know God and rejected God, it's kind of on two different planes. It's like it's hard to have a dialogue with someone who's coming from such different such different places.
Okay.
So could we, in response to that, and I guess maybe a way of concurring with that too, is that could we say that Peter, when he picked up the sword, he was attempting to act valiantly, so maybe he was feeling like he's led by the Spirit to do an act of valor there, and then Christ responded by saying, well, okay, that's fine, but let's go heal this man now, because we really don't want to hurt him. The soldier didn't really deserve to have his ear cut off. And like those different movements are really the Spirit playing out, let's say, some kind of a drama to produce greater insights. So like in one hand, you might be led by the Spirit to defend your household, and that might serve a greater good. On another hand, somebody might be led by the Spirit to back away and put their hands up and let that person have their way when they break in. It could just be in the moment where you almost have to then be tuned into the Spirit to know what's the right choice to make in that moment. What is the greater act of valor? And how does that fit into them being meek? These are difficult questions, but it requires contemplation really to sort some of that out.
Yeah, you see, the point is that you can't answer all the possibilities that are presented prudentially without the effort to contemplate all the possibilities. And it is possible too, like you said, that people of goodwill could differ on certain secondary answers. But I trust, given that human nature is one, that the primary answers are going to be very, very close. That's why, as a Catholic, this is just me personally, as a Catholic, I believe in natural law for that reason. This is like, on a primary level, we have this thing inside of us that moves us to do the good and avoid evil, right? That's what natural law, how it works out. But on a secondary level, you gotta allow for the interplay of different people's experience and so on, right? And their conscience, and the kind of community they came from, and the kind of family they came from, and things like that. But there is a universal, now you look at Pope John the 23rd, you really see there's a universal human nature that we got to start with. And so that's at least my effort to answer that. Dave?
Yes, that leads into my question here.
Good.
I haven't spent a lifetime studying philosophy like a lot of you, but it seems to me that the truth piece of this just seems impossible for me to understand. How, I've just made a list of 4 things: a jihadist, a KKK person, an African tribal chief, and a Catholic Christian. How can they find a common truth? I think we can find it, perhaps, but I don't understand, and Peter said something that made me click into this. I just find it impossible.
Right.
I find it impossible that you could take those 4 kinds of people in this world universally and find a common truth that somehow they're going to believe in our Catholic doctrine.
Oh, I don't think they'll believe in our Catholic doctrine, but they can certainly believe in, they can be moved to a common humanity. I agree with you that not everybody's going to accept Catholic doctrine. I got that very clear. Catholics won't even accept it, right? I mean,
Well, one thing is, they all had a mother, and they all had a father at some point. Biologically speaking, anyway. So in a sense, that's the place to start, as far as at their core, in their DNA, there's going to be some kind of common humanity there that can be appealed to.
And I think that the KKK member, I don't remember all the people you mentioned there, also probably wants to, he has that natural law driving him too, that he wants to do right. This is a different concept of what right is. He wants to do good, though. He wants to perhaps seek purity and eliminate those that aren't part of his view of purity.
but Chris,
In his mind, he wants to do good.
I can't resist the fact that I presented a KKK member with John Donne's book, Reasons of the Heart, in 1978. He was older, and he'd been in the KKK as a younger man. But I was kind of nervous to find out, and thought, well, what's he going to do with this? And the book, he started reading it, and the book started to convert it to Christianity at a whole new level. And I was kind of surprised. He started having dreams. Go back to Joel's point, he started having dreams about his mother, who had died many years before, and his mother, in the dream, kept quoting the Gospel of John. Well, if you know anything about John Donne's book, Reasons of the Heart, it's an extended, at least in some ways, a commentary on the Gospel of John, discovering light and life and love in the Gospel of John. So he said, that book, he's talking to me in a southern accent, wow, that book, it just got me dreaming about my mother, and then now she appears to me and says, the way is the light, and the light is the truth, and I just don't know what to do about it. He says, Gus, I only have one question. Is that guy, referring to John Donne, is that guy for real? That was very funny. But we managed over time to draw him to Christ. And it wasn't just me. It was another friend from the South who was from a evangelical tradition. So he was meeting with the guy in the South from the evangelical tradition, and he'd come up to Wisconsin and see me, and I'm throwing him these John Donne books. And he came home. So what I'm saying is it's not, nothing's impossible to God. That would be my answer. It's completely impossible for us. But, there's a way. Okay, yeah. There's a way. Yeah.
I just have one question. Are you familiar with the United Religious Community of Central County, where they encourage interreligious dialogue? And is that effective? Do you know much about that?
Well, yeah, I'm friends with the person who helps run the interreligious dialogue. He gave a retreat for my Africa project. His name is John. And, the last time I saw John was at the mosque after the shooting. And then I typed in on Facebook, I'm going to that prayer service, and I greeted him there. But yeah, sure, no, I believe in that. I believe that's a part of it. But I think that it's more important. Well, it's as important to contemplate and discover the path. It's because that's not the path for everybody. I'm for it, but yeah, I've engaged that some ways. Yeah, and it's okay to do that. Yeah, time has run away with us, and I appreciate your coming to Lunch and Learn today. On Wednesday, we've got Pope John Paul II, and thank you for listening to the